Greetings to you on this eve of the third Sunday in the season of Advent. Gaudete Sunday, Rose Sunday, thus my rose shirt and collar. Try to get ready for tomorrow. But in addition to that, it's our fifth week of our installment of What Shall We Build? And if you think about it, what we tried to say at the very beginning of this conversation was that it's fundamentally a spiritual conversation. That is to say, we're asking ourselves as individuals and as a community, what are we trying to build here in our life as Christians, as disciples, both in my personal life and in the life of the church, which I'm a member of, in this case, Church of the Resurrection. And so what we started to do is we laid out some building blocks of what we should be building with. First week we said we should be building with a spirit of generosity. And then in the second week we said we should be building with a spirit of community. In the third week we said we should be building with a spirit of service. And in the fourth week we said we should be building with a spirit of sacrifice. So when you put those things together, what you have is a foundation for which a building to be erected upon, to use the metaphor of a physical building. But we also know it's the foundation for the spiritual life. And so now we have to go to the blueprints. We've got the foundation in place, building with a spirit of generosity, a spirit of community, a spirit of service, and a spirit of sacrifice. Now we go to the blueprints. And the blueprints, of course, are found in the scriptures for what the church is called to be. And the church, in its fundamental vocation, is best found in the book of Acts. And so if we were to look at Acts chapter 2, especially the second part of it, we get some very, very clear blueprints about what the church is supposed to be about. Holding things in common, sharing things together, breaking the bread, teaching in the apostles' teaching, the fellowship, the liturgy, worship, community, koinonia. All these things are going on, and what we notice is that it says that as a result of living according to that blueprint and those foundations, that they were added greatly to their number. It says in one day there were 3,000. So we've got a blueprint, we've got a foundation, and we need to build some rooms in the building. The rooms of renewal. What shall we build in this last week? We're building renewal. What do the rooms look like that indicate that this is a building of renewal? Well, when you go into any structure, if it's a house, there are certain rooms you expect to be in place to make it a house. There's bedrooms, there's a bathroom, there's a living room. If you're in an office building, you expect there to be offices and meeting space, etc. Well, the same is true in the spiritual life of the church, that there should be certain rooms, many rooms of my Father's mansion, so to speak, that should be in place in order for the church to be about renewal. And so the first set of rooms I would like to point out on our blueprint is the rooms of prayer and planning. That going forward, we need commitments from our fellowship, the people in our parish, to commit to both prayer and planning. We need the parish to be on its knees regularly, praying for the work of the church, praying for the development of the parish, praying for Vision 2019, what shall we build? And actually, we need as much time, if not more time, in the time of prayer than we do sitting around the table trying to plan and make strategic decisions. Matter of fact, for every time we're at the table planning, we should also be before the altar praying. So that's one set of rooms, prayer and planning. The second set of rooms for building a place of renewal is the rooms of values and vision. As a parish seeking to be about renewal according to the work of the church that Jesus handed on to the apostles, that we in the Catholic faith have received over these 2,000 years, we have to change our atmosphere. We have to change our values. The atmosphere, the values that we have are sadly, we try to do the very least that needs to be done in order to do the work of the church on a day in and day out basis. Yes, there are moments that we really hit stride, but there are other moments that we're kind of on cruise control. We need to change the atmosphere into a proactive sense of valuing who we are and what we're called to do. And if we can change that atmosphere of the values, then we'll have a clear propulsion to journey forward with a vision. There's no sense in changing the vision if the values are going to stay the same. That the vision is this big picture and we're going to just hang out over here. The vision of resurrection and its values must be aligned together, not on paper, but in the hearts and the minds of each and every person that says they're part of this community of faith. The values and visions either stand together or not at all in the building of renewal. The third set of rooms that we have in our building, faith and works. And this is an age-old conversation, of course, based on the letters from James and the letters of Paul. But a parish seeking renewal recognizes these two things, faith and works, are intimately connected to witnessing and forming disciples. It's not either or, it's both and. It's both faith and works, working collaboratively, working consecutively to reach those who are disconnected from the faith community, to reach those who are alienated from the faith community, that they'll know we are Christians by our love, as it says in Thessalonians, that we'll be able to put into practice, in very clear practice, what we say and what we believe. Remember when, I think it was Brother Leo, who went to Francis of Assisi and said, I want to go out with the other brothers and preach. And apparently Leo wasn't very well spoken and wasn't perhaps as schooled as some of the others. And so he very much wanted to do this great work that the Franciscan renewal was bringing about. And so, finally, Francis relented. And he said, Brother Leo, yes, you may go out and preach, but only use words if you must. Faith and works is kind of like that at times. It's not about great catechetical teaching all the time. It's not about all the great memorization. Sometimes it's simply about the corporal works of mercy and the spiritual works of mercy. So a building of renewal recognizes that faith and works are collaborative and connected, not separate, and that they are cohesive in terms of how the church is called to witness itself in the world. So 3 sets of rooms so far. We got 2 more rooms I'd like to share with you very quickly. This is going to sound a little awkward perhaps to some of you, but the 4th set of rooms is about principals and investors. Now, every building project has a set of principals and investors. I learned a little bit about this from our architect friend, Will Alexander, of course, who's now gone home to be with the Lord. But Will would explain to me how very often these major building projects would go forward. You have the principals, who are the guiding visionaries, who are the managers of how this project is going to get put together. And then you have the investors, the people who are willing to finance it to see these wonderful edifices go up. Both are necessary. In the case for building a parish of renewal, the principals in our case are the leaders of the parish, the clergy, and the laity. They set tone and direction. But it's not sufficient for them just to set tone and direction. We also need investors. We need people who understand that the renewal of the parish requires investment that is emotional, investment that is spiritual, and of course, investment that is financial, so we can operate the parish and do the work that God's given us to do. Renewal happens when leaders lead and congregations invest. So our 4th room is about principals and investors. Our 5th and last room really is something that's probably near and dear to many of you. It's certainly near and dear to me, and that's the balance of past and present. A parish seeking to be about renewal has to appreciate from whence it came. It's terribly important. The story of who we are and where we've come from is terribly important. It shapes us in ways that sometimes we're conscious of and other times we're not conscious of. But most importantly, the past is something that shapes us so that we can take an approach to the present and the future that says we know where we've come from, we know what our values and vision are, and we know what needs to occur. And we know this because we've done it in the past. We have a track record. Sometimes our track record has been very effective and our past is rather glorious, and in other circumstances we perhaps weren't as effective as we might like. But the past and the present and the valuing of the past and the present are terribly, terribly important in terms of this building for renewal. So, what shall we build is a question that, if you think about it, requires deep thinking. It requires systematic change, and it requires a significant undertaking of risk. Leaving that which we've known and going to something which we haven't tried before. Here's what we know from the tradition of the church when people have undertaken risk, have undergone deep thinking, have pursued systemic change. We look at Ezra and Hezekiah coming out of the Babylonian exile. We look at the apostles and the first century church fathers. We look at St. Gregory in the 6th century, and St. Benedict in the 5th century, and the reforms that they tried to bring about in the church. We look at Martin Luther in the 16th century and the Reformation in Europe. We look at the Tractarians, the Oxford Tractarians in the 19th century in the Church of England, and we look at people who have been leaders in the charismatic renewal. But you notice that throughout the church there's been these many, many movements of the Spirit of God calling us to deep, deep thinking, deep reflection, deep praying, deep change. And what's happened is that every time that's been undertaken with humility and grace and courage and trust in God, that renewal has happened, that the church was changed for the better, that God empowered his people to revitalize the church and change it for the future for the sake of the kingdom. It holds out great promise and holds out great joy. That's how I'd like you to take this whole conversation to heart, with great promise and great joy. That yes, it will require generosity, it will require the foundations of community and service and sacrifice, it will require the construction of rooms that have values and visions and faith and works, principles and investors, honoring the past and the present. But it also will be exciting and renewing and life-giving, and most importantly, pointing out the kingdom of God to Hillsborough County in Tampa Bay. So, what shall we build? Well, we can't build anything if we don't have investors. And really the point of these conversations is asking you simply to invest with your heart, your mind, your spirit, and your treasure. It's all a matter of the will, really. I've always said about the will, it's really simple in terms of the work of the church. The Lord God gave us minds to think, hearts to love, souls to pray, hands to serve. We put those things together for the sake of the kingdom. We can do great things for God. In this Christmas season, as we move towards the close of Advent, we have the greatest story ever told coming right before us. Wouldn't it be great in this moment, the 21st century, to be a part of that story in a way that changes the world. Well, thanks for being part of the conversation of what shall we build. This week, we're building renewal and new rooms for our Father's house. God bless. We'll see you at church tomorrow, hopefully. If not, hope you'll be praying for us. We have our annual ingathering. We'll be looking at the new renderings for the parish. We'll be honoring the parishioner of the year. We'll be celebrating some of the great things that have happened in the ministry of the church this year, like Res 242 and the arrival of Mark Prophet. So many good things are happening. Imagine if we can just invest ourselves in a renewed way, in a concerted way, that says, what shall we build? We shall build the kingdom right here and right now. God bless. Have a good day, everybody.